Her name is Emini. From this day, she
Why
is
would
yours.
you give such a precious child to me?
Because your heart is kinder than the river that saved me. Listen carefully, Kamari. No blade must ever touch her hair.
Not once.
Not for any reason.
But why? What will happen if...
Every blessing comes with a price. Kamari discovered that the night a mermaid placed a baby in her arms. But long before that unforgettable night, Kamari had nothing. She was a woman whose laughter had long become a memory. Many seasons had passed since death carried away her husband, leaving behind only an empty hut and a heart too heavy for words. They had prayed for a child throughout their marriage, but none ever came. By the time she became a widow, people no longer called her by her name. They simply whispered, "the lonely one." Whenever mothers gathered beneath the great trees to braid their daughters' hair, Kamari watched from afar with a quiet smile that hid an aching heart. During festivals, she remained inside her little home while songs of celebration drifted through her window like reminders of the life she never had. Yet, despite all her sorrow, she never allowed bitterness to settle inside her heart. She greeted everyone with kindness. She shared what little food she had with hungry travelers. She cared for abandoned animals that wandered into her compound. The villagers often wondered why someone who had lost so much still chose to be gentle. Only the river knew the answer. Every evening, as the sun melted into shades of gold and crimson, Kamari carried her clay pot to the riverside. She said the sound of flowing water eased the loneliness that words never could. Little did she know, the river had been watching her all along. One evening, dark clouds gathered without warning. The wind bent the tall grasses, and birds hurried back to their nests. Most people rushed home before the rain arrived. But Kamari still needed water. As she knelt beside the river, a faint cry drifted across the water. At first, she thought it was the call of a wounded bird. Then, she heard it again. Soft, weak, desperate. She followed the sound until she reached a patch of thick reeds near the riverbank. Hidden beneath them was an old hunting net tangled around a young woman. The ropes had wrapped tightly around her arms and waist, cutting into her skin. She struggled to free herself, but every movement only tightened the knots. The stranger possessed a beauty unlike anything Kamari had ever seen. Her skin shimmered softly as though kissed by moonlight, and her long dark hair flowed around her like silk. Without hesitation, Kamari dropped her water pot and hurried to help. "I have no knife," she whispered, "but do not be afraid." Patiently, she untied each knot one after another. The work was slow. Her fingers became sore. More than once, the ropes tightened again. Still, she refused to give up. When the final knot loosened, the young woman smiled with eyes filled not only with gratitude, but with something far deeper. As Kamari helped her toward the water, droplets splashed across the stranger's feet. For only a heartbeat, tiny silver scales shimmered across her skin before disappearing again. Kamari froze. She blinked. Had she imagined it? Before she could speak, the woman gently touched her shoulder. "Not every kindness is forgotten," she said softly. "When the river remembers your name, do not be afraid." Then she stepped into the water. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. And before Kamari's astonished eyes, she disappeared beneath the surface without leaving behind a single ripple. The river became perfectly still. Only Kamari remained, clutching her clay pot and wondering whether she had witnessed a dream. Days passed, then weeks. Kamari spoke to no one about the mysterious woman. Who would believe her? Life slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm. Until one quiet evening, the river looked different. No breeze stirred its surface. No bird sang. Even the insects had fallen silent. A strange mist rolled gently across the water. Kamari felt the hairs on her arms rise. Then the water parted. The same beautiful woman emerged, untouched by the current. This time, there was no hiding who she truly was. From her waist upward, she appeared as before, but beneath the water glimmered the magnificent silver tail of a mermaid, its scales catching the fading light like countless tiny stars. Resting peacefully in her arms was a sleeping baby wrapped in white cloth embroidered with delicate shells. Without a word, the mermaid carefully placed the child into her trembling arms. "This little one is called Emini," she said. "She belongs to both the river and the earth. I have watched you. I have seen your loneliness. I have seen your kindness when no one else was looking. You asked the heavens for a child many years ago. The heavens remained silent, but the river did not." Tears filled Kamari's eyes as she held the baby close. "You mean she is mine?" The mermaid smiled gently. "She will become your daughter in every way that truly matters. But every gift guarded by the river carries a promise." Her expression suddenly grew serious. "You must never allow a blade to touch her hair. Not one strand. No matter who asks, no matter the reason. The day her hair is cut, Emini will remember where she truly belongs." Kamari nodded without hesitation. "I swear it. I will protect her with my life." The mermaid reached out and softly kissed Emini's forehead. Then she looked at Kamari one final time. "Love her completely, but never forget. Some children are entrusted to us. They are not given to us forever." Before Kamari could ask another question, the mist thickened. The mermaid slowly disappeared beneath the water. The river became silent once again. Standing alone beneath the evening sky, Kamari looked down at the little girl sleeping peacefully in her arms. For the first time in many years, she no longer felt alone. But somewhere beneath the quiet waters, ancient eyes watched, waiting for the day a single strand of hair would fall. The years passed as gently as the flowing river, and little Emini grew into a bright, cheerful girl whose laughter filled every corner of Kamari's once silent home. To Kamari, every day with her daughter felt like a gift she had never expected to receive. She taught Emini to sweep the compound at sunrise, pound yam with steady hands, greet every elder with respect, and show kindness even to those who had none to offer. Emini learned quickly. She was hardworking, she never spoke rudely. Whenever an elderly person struggled to carry firewood, she hurried to help before anyone asked. When children argued over toys or fruit, she was always the first to make peace. Soon, people began saying that no child in the village had a heart as gentle as Emini's. But there was one thing everyone noticed. Her hair. It grew faster than anyone had ever seen. When she was 6, it reached her waist. By 10, it brushed against her knees. By the time she entered womanhood, it flowed almost to her ankles like a dark river behind her. Yet, it remained soft and beautiful. It never tangled, it never broke. Every morning, Kamari carefully combed it with a wooden comb carved by her late husband years before. The task took so long that neighbors often laughed. "Kamari, Tede. At this rate, you will spend half your life combing that girl's hair." Kamari laughed with them, but inside, fear quietly stirred. Every stroke of the comb reminded her of the promise she had made beside the river. No blade, not one strand. Sometimes, Emini would smile and ask, "Mother, why won't you let anyone trim my hair, even a little?" Kamari would gently cup her daughter's face. "Because your hair is your crown. It is part of the blessing that brought you to me." Emini accepted the answer without another question. She trusted her mother completely. Not everyone looked upon Emini with the same warmth. There was a woman named Saria. She lived alone in a large compound inherited from her parents and took great pride in being admired by everyone around her. She loved beauty, she loved attention, and she could not bear seeing someone else receive either. Whenever people praised Emini's kindness, Saria smiled outwardly, but inside, jealousy slowly took root. One afternoon, she watched from her doorway as young girls gathered around Emini. They begged to touch her long hair. "It feels like silk," one girl whispered. "It shines even without oil," another said. An old woman passing by chuckled. That child was born under a fortunate star. Those words lingered in Saria's mind. A fortunate star. From that day onward, she began to watch Emini more closely. She noticed something peculiar. Whenever Emini washed her hair in water carried from the river, tiny white shells would sometimes appear inside the clay basin afterward. No one else seemed to notice, only Saria. The first time she saw it, she picked one up. It sparkled strangely before crumbling into fine silver dust between her fingers. Her heartbeat quickened. "This is no ordinary girl," she whispered. Her curiosity soon became an obsession. She followed Kamari and Emini from a distance. She listened whenever villagers spoke about them. She searched for anyone who remembered where the child had come from. But no one knew. It was as though Emini had appeared from nowhere. The mystery refused to leave her mind. And mysteries, she believed, always hid something valuable. As Emini grew older, keeping the promise became more difficult than Kamari had ever imagined. The young women in the village often gathered beneath the shade of the Iroko tree to braid one another's hair before festivals. Every time they invited Emini, she politely declined. "My mother will do it," she would say with a smile. Some accepted her answer, others found it strange. One afternoon, an elderly hairdresser visited Kamari's compound. "My daughter," the old woman said kindly, "your girl's hair has become too long. Let me shape it just a little. It will grow healthier." Kamari stepped back so quickly that she nearly dropped the basket she was carrying. "No!" The word escaped before she could soften it. The old woman stared at her in surprise. Realizing her mistake, she forced a smile. I promised her father before he died that no one else would ever cut her hair." The explanation sounded convincing enough. The old woman nodded and left. But someone had been listening from outside the fence. Saria. She had heard every word. Yet, something about Kamari's frightened voice did not match the explanation she had given. People who kept ordinary promises did not tremble. People protecting ordinary hair did not panic. Saria smiled to herself. There is a secret hidden in that hair, and I intend to uncover it. From that day onward, she stopped merely watching. She began planning. She spoke sweetly whenever she met Emini. She brought small gifts to Kamari. She offered to help with chores. Slowly, she earned their trust. But behind every smile lay a single purpose: to discover why one strand of Emini's hair was worth more than all the gold in the village. Far away, beyond the reeds where the river grew deep and silent, a pair of watchful eyes rose briefly above the water. The mermaid had not forgotten her promise, and neither had the river. The season of the harvest festival finally arrived. It was the happiest time of the year. Women pounded fresh yams before sunrise. Men decorated the village square with colorful woven cloth. Children ran through the streets with laughter that echoed from one compound to another. Even Kamari allowed herself to smile. "Emini," she said as she fastened a string of coral beads around her daughter's neck, "stay close to me today." Emini laughed softly. "Mother, I am no longer a little girl." "You will always be my little girl." The two embraced before joining the celebration. The village square was alive with music. Drums thundered, dancers twirled in graceful circles, and elders offered prayers of thanksgiving for another fruitful season. As always, Emini drew admiring glances. Her long, flowing hair shimmered beneath the afternoon sun, reaching almost to the ground. Young girls gathered around her. "Your hair grows more beautiful every year. What oil do you use?" Emini smiled.
No special oil, my mother simply cares for it. Not far away, Saria watched every movement with patient eyes. Hidden beneath the folds of her wrapper was a tiny bronze blade, not large enough to frighten anyone, not sharp enough to draw blood, but sharp enough to cut one slender strand. She waited patiently. Then opportunity came. A group of dancers rushed into the crowd, laughing as they invited everyone to join them. In the joyful confusion, Emini became separated from Kamari. Saria stepped behind her. No one noticed. Her fingers moved quickly. The blade flashed once beneath the sunlight. Snip. Only one slender strand slipped silently from Emini's hair. It floated gently toward the earth. The instant it touched the ground, the celebration stopped. The drums fell silent. A powerful wind swept across the village without warning. Dark clouds gathered above the river. The single strand of hair shimmered. Before the horrified eyes of those standing nearby, it transformed into tiny silver scales that sparkled briefly, then dissolved into water. Emini gasped. A sharp pain shot through her head. She clutched her temples and collapsed. "Mother!" Her voice was barely a whisper. Kamari turned. The moment she saw the severed strand of hair lying upon the ground, her heart nearly stopped. "No!" She fell beside Emini, trembling. "No, no, no!" But the promise had already been broken.
Emini remained unconscious until nightfall. When she finally opened her eyes, everything felt different. The world seemed quieter. Yet, beneath that silence, she could hear something. A voice. Soft, gentle, calling her name. Emini. She sat upright. "Mother, did you hear that?" Kamari looked around. "Hear what, my child?" "There's singing." "There is no singing." But Emini knew what she had heard. The melody drifted from the direction of the river. Beautiful, familiar, almost like a lullaby she had known before she could remember. That night, she dreamed of a kingdom beneath crystal waters. Great silver fish swam through towering pillars of coral. Children laughed as they chased glowing pearls through underwater gardens. At the center of it all stood the beautiful mermaid. She smiled sadly. "My daughter." Emini reached toward her. "Who are you?" Before the mermaid could answer, the dream vanished. Morning came, but the dreams did not stop. Each night they grew clearer. Each day, the mysterious song became louder. Sometimes Emini would pause in the middle of sweeping the compound, staring toward the river without realizing it. Other times, she found herself humming a melody she had never learned. One evening, she quietly asked Kamari, "Mother, have I always belonged here?" The question pierced Kamari's heart. She could no longer hide the truth. Taking Emini's hands in hers, she told the story she had guarded for so many years. She spoke of the lonely days after her husband's death. She spoke of the woman trapped inside the net. She spoke of the child placed into her arms beside the silent river. And finally, she spoke of the promise. No blade must ever touch your hair. Tears streamed down Emini's face. "You knew." Kamari nodded. "I knew. And you never told me. I wanted you to live as every other child. I wanted you to forget that one day," her voice broke, "one day the river might ask for you." Mother and daughter embraced tightly. Neither spoke again that night. Outside, the river continued singing. From that day onward, strange things began happening throughout the village. Each morning, the river stood higher than it had the day before. Fields nearest the water became soaked. Fishing boats drifted loose from their ropes without anyone touching them. Children claimed they saw shimmering figures beneath the surface at sunset. The elders grew uneasy. This river has never behaved this way. By the 7th morning, the water had reached the first row of farms. People hurried to carry their harvests to higher ground.
Fear spread through the village. Meanwhile, Emini grew weaker. She ate little. She slept even less. The mysterious song never left her ears. It followed her everywhere. One evening, unable to resist any longer, she quietly walked toward the river. Kamari awoke to find her sleeping mat empty. Panic seized her. She ran barefoot through the darkness. Emini! Emini! She found her standing peacefully at the riverbank, gazing into the moonlit water. Then, the river began to glow. The water slowly parted. From its depth emerged the same beautiful mermaid Kamari had met many years before. She had not aged by a single day. Her silver tail shimmered beneath the moonlight. Behind her stood countless silent figures rising just beneath the surface, watching from the deep. Kamari fell to her knees. You! The mermaid's eyes were filled with sorrow rather than anger. The promise has been broken. I know, Kamari whispered through tears. I tried. You kept your word for many years. You loved her well. For that, the river is grateful. Emini stepped forward. Her voice trembled. Are you? The mermaid smiled gently. I am the one who brought you into this world. Before another word could be spoken, thunder rolled across the sky. The river surged violently. Water spilled over its banks, racing toward the sleeping village. The spirits beneath the water remained still, waiting. The choice that had been foretold for years had finally arrived. The roar of the river grew louder with every passing heartbeat. Water burst over the banks, racing toward the village like a living beast. People awoke to terrified screams. The river is flooding! Run! Save the children! Mothers clutched their babies. Men grabbed whatever they could carry. Within moments, the peaceful village had become a place of panic. Kamari stood frozen at the riverbank, tears streaming down her face. She looked at the mermaid, then at Emini. There must be another way, she pleaded. There has to be. The mermaid lowered her eyes. For every promise made by the river, there is only one ending. I did not wish this more than you did. Kamari shook her head desperately. No, I cannot lose my daughter. You gave her to me. You told me to love her, and now you want to take her away? For the first time, sadness crossed the mermaid's face. I never asked you to love her halfway. I asked you to love her completely, and you did. You gave her a childhood. You gave her laughter. You gave her the love that every child deserves. No gift from the river could have been greater. Emini stepped quietly between them. She looked toward the frightened villagers struggling against the rising water. Children cried as the flood crept closer to their homes. An elderly man fell while trying to escape. Several young men rushed to pull him to safety. Emini's heart ached. She turned to Kamari. You always taught me that kindness costs us something. You said that doing what is right is not always easy. Kamari could barely speak. My child. Emini smiled through her tears. You have been my mother every day of my life. No river can ever take that away. She wrapped her arms around Kamari one last time. The embrace lingered. Neither of them wanted to let go. Finally, Emini whispered, Thank you for choosing me. Kamari closed her eyes. It was the greatest blessing of my life. Slowly, Emini stepped toward the water. The moment her feet touched the river, the raging current became calm around her. The floodwaters stopped advancing. The river circled gently at her ankles, as though welcoming her home. She turned for a final look at the woman who had raised her. Then she smiled, not with sadness, but with peace. The silver scales hidden within her awakened, spreading gently from her feet upward until they shimmered beneath the moonlight. The villagers watched in stunned silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Emini walked farther into the river. With every step, the floodwaters slowly began to retreat. The river obeyed her. The overflowing banks returned to their place. The frightened current became smooth once more. When she reached the mermaid, the woman opened her arms. Mother and daughter embraced beneath the moonlight. Then, together, they disappeared beneath the water. The river closed above them. Silence fell across the village. Many seasons passed. The flood never returned. The river became calmer than anyone could remember. The villagers often spoke of the young woman whose sacrifice had saved every family. No one mocked Kamari again. No one called her unlucky. Instead, they honored her as the mother of the girl who gave up everything for people who could never repay her. Though her home was quiet once more, Kamari no longer visited the river with tears alone. Every evening, she carried a small woven basket filled with fresh white lilies and placed them gently upon the water. She never asked for Emini to return. Love, she had learned, was not proven by holding on. Sometimes it was proven by letting go. Then, on the night of every full moon, something extraordinary happened. As the lilies floated across the river, hundreds of butterflies appeared from nowhere. They danced above the water in shimmering circles before disappearing into the darkness. And, if the night was still enough, if the wind chose to not speak, a soft, familiar voice could be heard beneath the gentle waves. It was a song, the very lullaby that had once called a young girl home. Whenever Kamari heard it, she simply smiled. She placed one hand over her heart and whispered, "My beautiful Emini, no matter where the river carries you, you will always be my daughter." The water sparkled once beneath the moonlight, as if answering her.
And from that day on, the elders would tell every child who came to the river's edge, "Never break a promise made to the river, for its gifts are precious, but they are never truly ours to keep."